Good afternoon, everyone. It is 1:30. We will call to order the August 28, 2019 meeting of the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency Board of Directors. I'll ask everyone to please rise. And Robert, would you lead us in the pledge?
Please follow along with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Chair West?
Yes.
Director Aranio?
Here.
Director Craven?
Here.
Director Borchard?
Here.
Agenda review, anything on the agenda that needs altering?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Public comments. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board on matters not otherwise on today's agenda. Please step forward, identify yourself, and be heard.
Good afternoon. My name is Esper Peterson. I'm a farmer and a member of the coalition. The coalition has sued the GMA in court, and it's in Santa Barbara Courthouse. I know that the GMA is proceeding with the GSP to try and adopt it here by November. We still have 2 more years before that has to be actually submitted to the state. Do you know how much the GMA has spent on the GSP to date?
Yeah, without looking at the budget numbers, I don't remember. Plus, if you'll notice, this is an opportunity for public comment, not board discussion. We're not allowed to.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll help you with that then. $1,293,000. You're going to spend another $441,000 this year. That's almost 1.7 million. When this judge rules what's going to happen, that's what's going to happen, not necessarily what the GMA says is going to happen. It's going to be under the court supervision, and the plan, if it changes, has been a waste of time doing it. If it changes, if it doesn't, then it wasn't. But I really don't see the reason to proceed with the rushing to judgment to get this passed through when there are so many people that are in a disagreement with that. Seems like a total waste of time to me, and I would hope that you would take a little time and try to work with all the people that you're regulating out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Joyce Seiler, and I'm a resident and taxpayer in the city of Oxnard and a concerned citizen. And on April of this year, the Ventura County Board of Supervisors passed an ordinance restricting certain oil and gas activities in the area of the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency. Proponents of the moratorium claim that there is an apparent threat to health. While apparent can mean anything from a conceived idea to a fact, we don't know what it is. And they say that it affects the safety and health and welfare. They say that there is contamination from the oil and gas. If this is really the case, why hasn't the Fox Canyon Board addressed this issue? If there is really an issue, I'd like to see this agency make a statement so that the public knows definitively that the water supply is safe or not safe, especially if this agency is spending money to recharge that basin. I believe that if there was a true threat to public health, this agency would be taking some action and releasing their annual reports immediately that the state of water is okay. The fact that Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency has not released an annual water quality report in 3 years makes one wonder what is really going on and what have they really done, because surely they are testing that water continuously. Thank you for your attention, and I hope to see this on a future agenda.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Jennifer Truba with the City of Ventura, Ventura Water. And I'm just here to express a continued concern with the delay of the implementation of the allocation ordinance. It's our understanding that Fox Canyon staff intends to bring the ordinance for consideration again in September, but may be recommending an implementation date of not till October of 2020. We have significant concerns about delaying the implementation of that ordinance for another year. We have drafted a letter that we recently sent to the board. We just want to bring attention to that. And the details of our concerns are outlined in that letter.
Thank you. Any other public comments on matters not on the agenda?
Good afternoon. My name is Jack. Several months ago, the Board of Supervisors passed a moratorium on steam injection oil and gas wells.
Jack, do you have a last name?
Oh, yes, sorry, Breaker, Breuker. Several months ago, the Board of Supervisors passed a moratorium on steam injection oil and gas wells, citing incomplete data as justification for such action. Since the Fox Canyon GMA has a duty to carry out programs, measures, or actions taken to preserve, protect, and enhance groundwater resources of the Fox Canyon aquifer, I would hope that this agency would do everything in their power to assure the people that the water is safe. If contamination is indeed an issue, then I'd encourage this agency to take the necessary steps for remedy from a technical, scientific approach rather than the political perspective that the Board of Supervisors is leaning on. I'd like to request that you submit a letter to the Board of Supervisors asking that anything related to the emergency ordinance be conducted and concluded in an expedited manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Moving on, any board comments?
I have a question, and I know I'm not trying to discuss what people said, but when do we plan for the allocation ordinance to come back to us?
My understanding is at least one of them will be back in September. Beyond that, I don't know.
Okay. Another question. Did we previously, somebody talked about water quality reports. Did we previously release those? I know all of our agencies do, but I don't know about this agency.
Well, our data is released annually with respect to the constituents that we measure, but with respect to hydrocarbons and other constituents that are not monitored by your agency, they're not being obviously collected and monitored.
Okay. Should they be?
Well, I'm sure that's
Should we be doing that? Should somebody be doing that?
the oil and gas. My understanding is the oil and gas industry is regulated by DOGGR, and so the requirements for their operation and their monitoring and the constituents that they have to measure are being regulated, and the oil and gas industry adheres to the DOGGR's oversight by the state.
The state.
The state.
With regards to a small water company or a municipal water agency, we would have to do those tests a minimum of once every 3 years as part of our triennial groundwater quality analysis. So as far as any lands that are under production by agricultural, I have no idea what their requirements are for testing.
Dave, any questions or comments? I just have one or two. One, I wanted to make a comment about the workshops that were done last week on the GSPs for both basins. I want to thank staff for the time and effort. Thank Dudek as well. The presentations were well attended. There were actually a lot more people at those than there are here today. And the presentations were well done. I think the questions and comments were helpful and instructive. And if nobody else noticed, I noticed that the gal from the Department of in Sacramento was making copious notes, particularly when staff was asked questions they couldn't answer. So to the extent that that occurred, you might want to go back and prepare for the next round. But thank you very much. It was very helpful. All right, moving on then to the consent agenda. Unless there's something anyone wants to question or pull off, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move approval.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, moving on then to item number 3.
Good afternoon, Chair West and directors. For the record, my name is Kathleen Rydell. I'm here to present item number 3. It's the Groundwater Recovery Enhancement and Treatment Program. It's the Advanced Water Purification Facility Update and Report on Compliance and Effectiveness of Resolution 2013-2. So to expedite things here today, as you had seen in your agenda packet, the resolution is included in the agenda packet, as well as the recycled water management impact analysis plan and the monitoring plan. The facility, this is phase 1, so it's designed for 7,000 acre feet per year, of which 1,800 goes for city use and 5,200 was designated for agricultural use outside the city. There are a number of conditions in the resolution. Just to give you a quick summary, all of the conditions were met this year with the exception of one, and that is flipping over to condition number 8. Not all the recycled water users are in compliance with submitting their completed extraction reports, payments, fees, charges, and penalties. So with the discussion, recycled water deliveries began in February of 2016. Deliveries were made to 3 different parties, and the years are up on the board and also in the table included in the staff report. Pleasant Valley County, Southland Sod, Ryder Brothers. And any small discrepancies were due to timing of when the recycled water users read their meters versus when the city read the meters. I have 2 corrections to the staff report. When I added up the table that you will see in the staff report, I double counted 2017-2 reported deliveries. So the number, when I take out the double counting, it comes out to 184 acre feet for 2018. And the totals to date of recycled water pumping allocation that has been checked by this agency staff is 436. To date, as of the end of 2018-1, the first half of, as of the end of 2018-2, 5,362 acre feet of water has been delivered by the city of Oxnard through this program. So in conclusion, one of the key issues is complete and timely reporting by Pleasant Valley County Water District. And there has been no impact due to pumping of the recycled water pumping allocation, as no extractions have been made using that allocation. And that's because we've been in drought conditions and the forebay water levels are so low that it doesn't meet the triggers for being able to pump. So the recommendation is to receive and file this report. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Questions?
Kathleen, can you go back to your table that you had up there? So for 2018, as an example, you've said that in the report, the initial amount that was available for delivery to agricultural sources outside of the city limits was approximately 5,200. But yet only 2,700 was delivered according to the city themselves. Is that a function of a lack of demand, or was the plant offline? Do we know?
I don't know. This is what the city has reported to us as to what they deliver to the agricultural users. I know Tien is in the auditorium
Okay.
from the city of Oxnard, and he might be willing to provide a comment to that regard.
Okay.
But based on reported deliveries to the agency, 2,770 acre-feet were delivered in 2018.
So approximately 50%.
Yes.
Do we know if the 1,800 acre-feet that was allocated for in-city use was used at any point, or how much?
We only get reported to us what was delivered to the agricultural users for which they want recycled water pumping allocation.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you, Kathleen. Let me just ask any questions from the public on this item? Or comments, questions?
Good afternoon, Chair. Tien Ing with the City of Oxnard. Our questions is, it looks like the data is not complete and Pleasant Valley has been consistently late to the report. Is there a time frame? Is there a sunset time that they have to submit?
Agency staff has been contacting, Pleasant Valley County Water District is aware that they are behind in reporting and filing. They have submitted all the semi-annual extraction statements, and they have provided partial statements for 2015-16, 2016-17, and they have not submitted anything for 2017-18 as far as their efficiency allocation applications, so that they can have allocation. And so, but the first two are incomplete. They did not include other sources of water and have not reported on all the water delivered as to how it was used. So we cannot determine whether the use of the water was efficient, and therefore, based on the criteria and the resolution, the City of Oxnard is entitled to recycled water pumping allocation for those deliveries.
Is this an ongoing process with PV at this point, or?
We've sent out and talked to them and met with them multiple times each year for several years now. And
Where do things, I guess, where do things stand now in terms of, are there any agreed upon reporting dates, deadlines, promises made? What's the status of, or what are your expectations, I should say?
well, the last two meetings that we had associated with the Caneo Creek diversion and with the GREAT program when we met in May, Jared of Pleasant Valley County Water District, Jared Bouchard, has stated that he is working on it and that he is planning on submitting it. He looks at the surcharge amounts and he is concerned.
Chair West, board members, Kim Loeb, Fox Canyon staff. We are in the process or near future of taking enforcement action on Pleasant Valley on this issue because, as Kathleen has indicated, there's been lots of discussions and incremental reporting. It is a challenge. We recognize there is a challenge for both Pleasant Valley and United Water Conservation District on their PTP for reporting the water use by their customers. They've known that has been the requirement under IEI and Ordinance E, and still have failed to complete those that reporting. United is in the same boat as Pleasant Valley. And so we will be moving forward, hopefully to encourage both those agencies to get their reporting completed and up to date so that we can move forward with that. And in the case of Pleasant Valley, it's clearly a problem for the city of Oxnard under the RATE program.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Move to receive and file.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Let's move on then to item number 4. Is that yours also, Kathy?
Well, as the slide set changes, presentation. Good afternoon, Chair West and directors. For the record, my name is Kathleen Rydell, and I'm here to present item 4. Approval of funding for permitting of DWR TSS installation of nested monitoring well in the Oxnard subbasin. So your board authorized in March of this year authorization for the executive officer to apply to DWR for nested monitoring wells in the Pleasant Valley and Oxnard, the Pleasant Valley Basin, Oxnard subbasin. And staff was to return if there were any additional costs, funding needs associated with those applications. Staff submitted the applications to DWR, and agency staff obtained commitment from DWR for drilling of 2 nested wells in the Pleasant Valley Basin. And on June 26th of 2019, your board approved the additional funds to do the permitting for the Pleasant Valley County, or the Pleasant Valley Basin nested wells. So on July, so quickly going through here, on July 31st, DWR informed staff that they had additional funds in this year's program budget, and they would like to use it to do installation of the shallow monitoring wells in the Oxnard subbasin. The current driller is not capable of drilling to the depth desired for the deeper well, and the budget, which remaining as of a month or so ago, had about $360,000 or so $364,000 in the budget approximately at that time. And so they were just interested in including the shallow well in their program. So reminding you, I know we came back a while back in March, the proposed new well in the nested monitoring well in the Oxnard subbasin is located at the PNW 9. It was an identified data gap in the groundwater sustainability plans, the draft. And the figure comes from the draft groundwater sustainability plans. You can see the solid filled in squares. Those mark aquifer-specific monitoring well locations. And so then you can see that there's no filled in or squares in the area of the proposed new well. This is approximate location if you plotted it on our composite upper aquifer potentiometric surface map. And that is location with respect to the lower aquifer system potentiometric surface map. So as DWR had informed the agency that the state is not allowed to pay the permit fees, in June, you approved $35,000 for the permitting of the nested wells in the Pleasant Valley Basin. The estimated cost to DWR for the installation of the Pleasant Valley wells is $537,000. The estimated cost, just to get ahead of myself here, is about $300,000 for the nested well, shallow nested well in the Oxnard subbasin. Drilling began on the Pleasant Valley nested well on August 19th. Yesterday they hit total depth, or Monday they hit total depth on the pilot hole, and yesterday they did the geophysical logging. So we're preparing the final design of the well, and we will be installing casing beginning next week. So just to let you know the status of the Pleasant Valley well. DWR would like to go straight from this Pleasant Valley site over to the Oxnard site, and so there's a push to get permitting done if we want to go forward with this. So once again, about $300,000 is the cost of the Oxnard subbasin well just for the shallower one. As agency staff prepares the permitting, we will include for both the shallow and the deeper wells. The DWR has expressed an interest in coming back in the spring, if they get funding for this program, come back in the spring and drill the deeper one. These are the costs of the estimated costs for permitting with a contingency line to close to $4,000 in case there's some unexpected permitting fees that we haven't recognized yet or do not know. So in conclusion, DWR Technical Support Services Program will fund the direct cost for installation of the nested well. Permitting fees are to be paid for by Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency. The estimated not to exceed funding request is for $30,000. And the estimated cost of the shallow well to DWR is $300,000. And staff's recommendation is to approve expenditure up to $30,000 for obtaining permits for construction, environmental compliance, and reporting for the installation of a nested well in the Oxnard subbasin. Do you have any questions?
So if I understand you correctly, we spend $30,000, they give us $300,000?
They will spend $300,000 to install a nested well
All right.
in the Oxnard subbasin.
Questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the public on this item? Is there a motion to approve the action recommended in the staff report?
So moved.
Second. Need a roll call?
Chair West,
Yes.
Director Aranio,
Yes.
Director Craven,
Yes.
Director Borchard.
Yes.
Let's lose lights. We lose lights or am I going blind?
They don't want to shine for the camera.
Oh. All right, item number 5.
Good afternoon, Chair West and members of the board. Kim Loeb again with Fox Canyon staff. So this item is consideration of a resolution and a public hearing to consider an increase in groundwater extraction fees. Just as a brief background, the current extraction fees are $12.50 an acre foot, which consists of a $6 per acre foot extraction charge and a $6.50 per acre foot sustainability fee. Your board adopted the 2019-20 budget at the June 26 meeting, and that budget, the fees were projected to produce an annual revenue of about $1.5 million, assuming a long-term average pumping of 125,000 acre feet per year agency-wide. As we discussed then and subsequently, that leaves the operations fund in the red about a little more than $500,000. We came back to your meeting last month on July 24th and discussed several different options for what an increase in a sustainability fee might be. And your board directed that we return today with the resolution in front of you to consider increasing the sustainability fee to $11 per acre foot in the fiscal year 2019-20 for a total fees of $17 an acre foot, and then have that increase to $14 an acre foot in 2020-21 for a total extraction fee of $20 per acre feet. This table shows what that would look like. The first row there, see if I can get this cursor up, it's a little squirrely. This is the current fee, and this is what was in the adopted budget for revenues and the ending balance of the operating fund. This is what it would look like adopting the extraction fees of $17, the annual revenue based on that long-term average 125,000 acre foot per year pumping. This is the revenue, what the operating fund ending balance would look like, and then implementing in fiscal year 2021 the $20 fee with the $2.5 million annual revenue, and then what the projected operating fund ending balance would be with the estimated expenses as they were in the budget. The effective dates, we're recommending rolling those in consistent with the reporting. So that would be July 1st, 2019 for the M&I and domestic pumpers, and August 1st, 2019 for agricultural operators, and then the increase in fiscal year 2020 to those same dates next year. So that concludes my presentation, and so our recommendations are that you can conduct the public hearing to consider this fee increase and then adopt the resolution.
Thank you, Kim. The one point I would make on the chart that you had back a few slides ago, there we go, showing that 2021 year where it projected a budget surplus of $430,000. That's a little misleading because you're accurate. That was based upon the expenses projected in the existing budget. The discussion that the board had at the time was that that budget drastically underrepresented the expected costs for GSP implementation and planning. And as a consequence, even at that rate, we were looking at a potential surplus, which is how we got to the rate that's recommended.
Thank you, Chair West. That is, yes, consistent with my understanding and exactly right.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I'll make a comment, and it's the same comment I made last month, was I am in agreement with the first increase of the $17 of the sustainability fee. I don't agree with making it retroactive years in advance. I think we have things coming at us that are unknown at this point, and for us to project those increases, I think, is unknown. And I say that based on my history of being here on this board, that we've seen these projections before and they haven't come to fruition. I think the $17 adequately covers us for the initial next year coming, and I would suggest we take a look and see what's needed when it comes our way next year. I think we have a responsibility to be cognizant of these rates and how they affect our ratepayers.
To that point, we have a couple letters here in front of us, and also for some of the companies that I work for that has a fiscal year that does not line up with this agency. And so making changes in mid-cycle when, for instance, over at Crestview, I'm 6 months through my fiscal year now, and then having a rate change is problematic. I would rather look at knowing that going forward, next year it's going to be $20 an acre foot. And if we have the cash left over or we're running fat, we can go ahead and drop the rates and everyone's going to be pretty happy. Versus what we're reading right now from the two letters we received. And I'm sure we're going to hear from other comments from individuals out there where our fiscal year just doesn't match the private companies that are out there. And they're caught in a hard spot now where they don't have sufficient money in their budget for the rate increases that we legitimately have to do.
I have a question of what you said. So are you in favor of increasing it to $20 for the following year, but not increasing it to $17 this year?
No, absolutely. I think the
didn't
17 is
understand.
necessary because that's the cost of doing business. And I'm also in favor of keeping it on track for 20 in the future year. And let's reevaluate when we get to this year what our expenses are going to be. And if we have to drop the rates, we're going to look like heroes because we're fat. At least by then, the companies will have it in their budgets coming up in the new fiscal year, and they'll be able to adjust their rates so they're not caught short.
Your comments on how they affect budgets are good, and I appreciate that. It's thoughtful for our ratepayers. I would just comment that the last time we entertained a reduction of fees, it was a literal pulling of teeth and severing arms to get that to happen. So I would just remind the board that that's not as easily done as said.
Thank you. Anything else? Any comments from the public?
Thank you, Chair West. Peter Goldenring, representing the Las Posas Basin Water Rights Coalition, and now, as I'm sure you know from the amendments in the adjudication litigation, a substantial number of other folks within the Las Posas Basin. We have a number of difficulties with this proposed ordinance, and I'll start by echoing Mr. Borchard's comments about no, you're never going to be a hero, Mr. Aranio, and you're never going to drop the fees because this is government. And it just doesn't happen. And while you may have personally the best intentions to do that, it isn't going to happen. We struggle with this request for a number of reasons, both from a fairness point of view as well as from a legal perspective. The first is that it seems to us that there has been a lack of transparency on the reserves of GMA. We've all known about the lockbox that was put away of over $1 million. And somehow that's never part of the operating budget, and there's no clarity as to what's being spent or how it's being spent. And so we think the operating budget is overstated relative to the decisions by staff to move things in or out of operating when there are substantial reserves. And the Water Code is quite clear that this body is limited in the types of reserves and the amounts of reserves that it can be maintaining. And in that regard, I would, as a sort of footnote to you, share that I'm guessing, have spent a fair amount of money both on county council and the Nossaman firm in the adjudication litigation. And for what it's worth, unlike actually the county's attorney in terms of resolving matters, unfortunately, your counsel have been less than helpful in terms of bringing resolutions to it. In terms of the legal issues, your ordinance differentiates between industrial wells and agricultural wells. There's no legal basis to do that. I'll give you an example. Grimes Rock has the old Egg City wells. They are agricultural wells. Some years ago, your staff just changed the characterization because part of that water is being used for a mine. Setting aside a whole lot of other legal issues that flow from that, all of a sudden now there's a different start date on a step up and implementation of a higher fee. There's no basis for that. There's no administrative record for that. You can't change groundwater. You can't treat groundwater extractors differently by the use that they put to it in terms of the fees that you're charging. So you have a different start date. And while I represent both agriculture and industrial, and the industrial I represent are small businesses in our county, this body has consistently favored agriculture, and while that may be a good thing, that's not okay, at least in this kind of context of an earlier start date, as I read the proposal, to the extraction fees for the industrial small user like Grimes Rock Inc., who has the same wells that have always been agriculture wells, and part of the water is used for industrial. Part of it is not, and all of a sudden they're going to have a different start date. And I just find that, frankly, offensive and contrary to the law, violates every principle of treating people equally. You also are purporting to start this extraction higher rate retroactively. There's no basis for that. You can't charge fees retroactively to a higher rate. That's not permitted under the Water Code. There's nothing in your ordinance, and I know that at the prior hearing, Mr. Loeb's explanation as well, we did that once before, so there's precedent. The fact that it happened prior and there wasn't a lawsuit doesn't mean it's okay. So you can't impose retroactive fees in this fashion. And lastly, the Water Code has a number of very specific requirements around when and how fees can be increased and what kind of notices have to happen. And I'm telling you honestly right now, that has not happened in connection with this ordinance. And I would urge that you think through how you move forward relative to this increased imposition. There's already litigation pending, and if we're going to move forward, and there's going to be some hope of resolution, then the waters need to calm down, and treating people differently and imposing things retroactively and all the other stuff that's going on around this is not helpful. Thank you.
Peter, before you walk away, I got a question, clarification.
Yes, sir.
Is it your contention then that we should be following Proposition 218 before we go through with our rates? You mentioned something.
No,
about
no,
how
the water code allows you to implement sustainability and extraction fees, but there's a very specific mechanism for that and certain notices that happen, and your administrative record is not consistent with that. It does not permit retroactive, and it does not permit differentiation between types of groundwater extractors. It's just in violation of the law.
Am I misunderstanding this then, in that the extraction fees that we are attempting to pass today are equally based upon an acre-foot of water, whether you are agriculture or whether you're industrial? There's no tiered rates here.
Correct, but you have different start dates. Your ordinance proposal is that the higher fees start on July 1 for industrial and August 1 for agriculture. Why? What's the basis of the differentiation between what you're using your water for? You can't do that, Mr. Aranio. You just can't do it. Like, you can't do stuff retroactively, and you've got to follow the water code, which requires certain notices to be issued, certain notifications to be given. There has to be an administrative record that that's happened. That hasn't happened either. So, you know, we're in the middle of litigation. Everybody's living a bit in a glass bowl. There's an awful lot of effort being made to try to calm the waters down. As I said, honestly, it's not being helped by your council, but it is being helped by the Waterworks Districts 1 and 9's council, which is exactly the opposite, frankly, of what I expected. So you're walking in a glass house into a raise of fees. It's not a Prop 218 issue, although I will tell you that when I went back and looked at the explanations for this at the last board meeting, and I made a note of them, I got one member of the board saying, let's increase it because we have legal fees coming. Well, that's the reserves. That's the lockbox money. That's not a legal basis. That was one board member's explanation of why this ordinance should pass. Another board member said, let's preload the funds for implementation of the GSP. There's no legal basis for preloading. That's not how the water code works on this kind of body. Maybe after the GSP is implemented and there are different mechanisms in place, but right now it's a year-to-year, dollar in, dollar out for legitimate operating expenses. And I would add, that's what you said at the last meeting. It's a dollar in, dollar out for legitimate operating expenses. But the problem you have is you have this huge reserve fund. There's nothing in the administrative record about what it currently is, how it's been spended, how much has been spent on lawyer fees, all those other issues. So there just is no, and there's a limitation under the water code is that the reserves, you can't, I mean, to be frank, the lockbox, in my view, was illegal from day one because the water code says you can't do that. So I think the cards need to come on the table now as to what is in that lockbox, what's left, who's authorizing what to be spent in what matter, because I'm not seeing any of that. And I think you pause around this. The extraction fees that you're permitted under the water code are for dollar in, dollar out, actual operating expenses, and some reasonable small amount for reserves. That's what the water code allows, and that's what it should be set at, and that's why Mr. Borchard's absolutely correct. You can't impose a fee for 2 years from now, because you don't have an operating budget that answers the question, what's the dollar in, dollar out number? It's got to tie to those issues as you move forward. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Chair West and directors. My name is Alma Casada, General Manager for Zone Mutual Water Company. I just wanted to read the letter that I submitted this morning in response to this item. Zone Mutual Water Company has reviewed the FCGMA fiscal year 1920 budget with proposed sustainability increase and provides the following response. Zone understands that the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency, while acting as a groundwater sustainability agency, is permitted to impose fees to fund preparation of a groundwater sustainability plan in accordance with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. Within the common goal and context of groundwater conservation and long-term sustainability of vital water resources, Zone is not opposed to the 1920 fiscal year proposed fee increase to $17 per acre foot. We do, however, have serious concerns about the timing and manner in which the fees are being imposed on the ratepayer and the FCGMA's recommendation to propose a multi-year fee increase through fiscal year 21-22. The FCGMA, while acting as the GSA, is asking for a substantial increase to extraction fees after the funds are needed. This is an increase of 36% over the current extraction fee. The shortfall in your current budget should have been identified during last year's budget considerations. The timing of the proposed fee increase does not provide Zone with the ability to budget appropriately if the FCGMA budgeting process is conducted in near real time and with the ability to impose fees retroactively. Zone's fiscal year follows the calendar year, and we did not anticipate a 36% increase to extraction fees in the middle of our fiscal year. Zone is also concerned about the FCGMA's proposal, while acting as a GSA, to make the fees retroactive for administrative convenience. Water Code Section 10730 states that a GSA shall make available to the public data upon which the fee is based at least 20 days prior to a public meeting. That public meeting is taking place today, and the proposed fee increase was provided to the public 7 days ago, which questions the legality of making the fee retroactive for administrative convenience. The intent of the State Water Code is to allow a full presentation of the fee proposal with a full budgetary review and justification for the increases, with enough time for the ratepayers to question the amounts and intended purposes of the funds. Zone believes it is inappropriate to propose a fee increase at the last minute without giving stakeholders time to evaluate the amounts and impacts to their operations. FCGMA staff is also recommending a fee increase to $20 per acre foot for the 2021 and 21-22 fiscal years. Zone believes it is inappropriate for the FCGMA to propose a fee increase for these future time periods because of the uncertainty in the costs associated with implementing the GSP, not to mention the ongoing litigation that may change administrative functions in the future and may suggest a different fee in the Las Posas Valley Basin as compared to other basins. Given the uncertainty in the FCGMA's budgeting process, questionable authority to impose retroactive fees while acting as a GSA, and the ongoing litigation, Zone proposes the following. Number one, the FCGMA should determine if retroactive fees can be legally imposed. Two, the FCGMA should consider implementing the proposed fee increase for the 1920 fiscal year beginning October 1st to coincide with the Sigma water year. Number three, identify the fee as a separate line item instead of combining it with the FCGMA's sustainability fee to facilitate future adjustments. And lastly, number four, revisit the proposed $20 increase for the 2021 fiscal year during the next year's budgeting review process to provide adequate input by ratepayers. Lastly, the Water Code also states that before imposing or increasing a fee, the Public Utilities Commission must be notified if the basin includes a water corporation regulated by the PUC. Rio Plaza Water Company is in the Las Posas Valley Basin. Correspondence with Mr. James Booth of the PUC confirms that as of August 23rd of this year, the PUC has not been notified of the proposed fee increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Alma. Anyone else? All right, just any discussion among the board? Kim, if I may, let me start with the first question. Why is there a difference between the implementation dates with respect to M&I and industrial versus ag?
So the reason for that is the semi-annual reporting periods for the agriculture, you'll recall, is a 7-month and 5-month reporting period for the first part of the year, and then the second part under the current ordinance e-reporting. And for the M&I and domestic, it is at January 1st and then July 1st, through June 30th. So that is the way, consistent with the way extractions are reported to the GMA on a semi-annual basis. Because the allocation, of course, for ag is on the IAI.
So it's August and January on the II?
August and January for the ag IAI reporters. That's correct.
Any other questions?
I have a question for Al. You've obviously heard Mr. Goldenring's testimony, and you've heard Alma's. Can you give me a legal opinion about this, and are they wrong, partially right, maybe, you don't know? Give me some guidance here.
With regard to the retroactivity, there is nothing in the water code or anywhere else that prohibits that, so I disagree with that assertion. I also disagree with the assertion that the different start times is unlawful. The one issue that was raised and did escape my attention, and for that I apologize to the board, was this requirement that was added to SGMA 2 years ago to notify the Public Utilities Commission. And it looks like it's written broadly enough to apply whether or not any public utility is actually a entity that reports to the agency. And I would assume, I don't know, but I would assume that at least one water utility operates in each of the basins that would be subject to this fee. So, but my recommendation on that would be to close the public hearing and to continue this matter to the next meeting solely for the purposes for the board to discuss adoption of the fee increase, unless the will of the board is to not adopt any fee increase. So I don't know what the purpose of that PUC notification requirement is, but out of an abundance of caution, I would think it prudent to not adopt the fee today, so that would allow time for the agency to send that notification and eliminate that as a potential issue to challenge this fee increase.
Okay.
Except as I read that section of the water code, it applies after adoption of GSPs. But
I'm just reading.
As opposed to, it applies to the acts of a groundwater sustainability agency as opposed to the acts of a groundwater management agency.
Well, we are already
we adopted the GSP.
We just have not adopted it.
Haven't adopted
Plan,
the GSP.
yes.
You're right, we did qualify as a GSA. Okay. So with that, is there, I think Al's proposal is a good one. I have no problem deferring action on the resolution.
Gotta close the public hearing.
Okay, I guess it's first and foremost to close the public hearing and suggest that we adopt Al's suggestion to bring the resolution back next month after giving whatever appropriate notice is required under the code to the PUC, understanding that even if it gets adopted in September, it'll still have the same, unless staff recommends a change, still have the same inception dates as originally proposed.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? I guess we need a roll call for this?
Chair West,
Yes.
Director Aranio,
Aye.
Director Craven,
Yes.
Director Borchard,
Yes.
Thank you. All right, on to number 6, AMI implementation.
Director West, board members, Arnie Anselm, staff to the GMA. Here to give you an update on AMI implementation, an overview of the water market pilot phase 2 extension. That was the one that just ended July 31st. And then before your board today is action on a proposed ordinance for a phase 2 second extension. And while I'm up here, I'd also like to give you a brief summary on the Natural Resource Conservation Services Conservation Innovation Grant that we have through the Nature Conservancy. So AMI background, I don't want to go through this in big detail, but the board has been discussing AMI for 10 years. I've had a couple policy discussions here, plenty of workshops, and I just want to say that work has proved effective. Our compliance in the field of AMI is over 98%. These numbers, they change almost daily. The 7 wells that we have not had any response is down to 4. Through over 301 wells have installed AMI through the grant. We have a few more in process. 151 wells have installed AMI with different vendors, and we listed the different ones there. I just want to point out, we're not forcing people into the equipment through the grant. If they have better equipment to serve their operations, that's available. The AMI provides data and alerts. This is both good for the agency, but also for operations of for the pumpers. They can find leaks. They can find if the pump might have a problem. And it also, the data complies with the monthly reporting requirement, and we're receiving that data. Some challenges with that, I'll be honest, but it is working as planned. And on the alert side, GMA staff, in cooperation with the pumper, informally tested the alerting system with the ranch systems and the pump site AMI. Some lessons learned from that improved the notifications of the alerts to the GMA, but there were some loopholes, and future testing is planned, more formal testing.
Excuse me, Arnie.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a good time for this question, but is it getting tightened up where photos will not be required to be submitted with these? Because I thought the whole idea with the AMI reporting was that it was going to be automatic, and we were going to take the whole user reporting out of the question.
The photos from the AMI can be submitted for it, but we don't have access to grab those photos. So we want the pumper still be in that loop for now.
For now.
For now.
Is there an intent to be able to have that ability to, I mean, the camera's right over the dial. It's just that you don't have the authority to get the photo. Is that right?
Right, right.
So do you need authorization from the board to do that?
I need to put a little more thought into what our access is, and then the photos aren't 100%. So what do we need to do to ensure that the grower has the camera in place, and what happens when that's not there? And I need to put some more thought into it, to make it seamless so that the GMA is accessing that data without the grower involvement.
Fair enough. I've had a number of complaints from users saying, I thought the intent of this AMI was that it wasn't going to require me to do this stuff anymore. And yet they find themselves doing all the same work and more.
Right.
And they're wondering why they bothered.
I think some training on the data portal where they can get that information and send it into the GMA would help. And we have some of that planned in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
So some of the lessons learned beyond those you just mentioned, there is a challenge with the setup, making sure that it's reporting the correct values, that the year to date is zeroed out at the beginning, or not, that the meter is recorded so we know what 0 is for the year to date. And there was a challenge setting those up. Meter compatibility, not one system fits all meters, so there were some lessons in the technology there. Minor reporting discrepancies were found. That's when the semi-annual report was taken at a different time as the AMI, and so we were able to understand that. Definitely any equipment out in the field has challenges with theft and the environmental situations. And through this process, because of the grant eligibility requirements to be in compliance with all GMA ordinances and requirements and have no unpaid fees or surcharges, we were able to get people up to compliance. And those numbers there, they've been fixed, but that's what we found through the grant compliance. So I'm going to move on to the water market. So any other questions on AMI?
Would you back up?
Sure.
On that previous slide, so those numbers are those that are still not compliant?
I'm sorry, no, these are when the applications came in. 24% of the applications came in needed meter calibrations, and they've been fixed.
Oh, okay.
And some of this was the timing. There's a 3-year calibration window, and they were all at the very end of their 3 years.
Okay.
So background on the water market. The phase 1 was the first pilot test in 2016, or started December 2016. Very limited. Then phase 2 was broader, and this was under the grant, or actually both are under the grant, but phase 1 actually was completed before the grant was subawarded to the GMA. Phase 2, AMI was being installed. It was extended in November of 2018 to get more AMI involved, get installed, to get more participants. There was a challenge with the allocations setting up then, because there was intention to start a new allocation system in the Oxnard Basin on January 1st. So there was a bit of a delay getting this rolling, because we needed to come up with a new allocation system other than Ordinance E for all those participants. And that took some number crunching and a decision to get what that allocation is going to be. We went with the 17-18 water year. It's more current information, more applicable to the growers. And again, we had a big kickoff workshop in May, very late in the year. But what we had were 42 participation agreements circulated, meaning 42 COM codes indicated they wanted to join the water market. By the end of the year, we got 10 of them returned, but they did not meet our eligibility requirement for various reasons up there. And certainly our delay in getting things rolling probably played into it. It was average, if not above average, water year, may have taken out some of the enthusiasm for the water market. And I know I'm going to get the question, were there trades? Did we have any trades of allocations? And I want to point out that a lot of effort went into getting to the water market and building the support structure and getting it to this point. And so we took the opportunity to test that. And this testing was done by the Nature Conservancy and Cal Lutheran. And by design, the GMA, we do not have a role in the water market in the trading or matching trades. And so they did this test, 3 rounds of testing on 3 different weeks, so we can make improvements in between each trade or each round of tests. Bids and offers were matched. Transfers of acre feet and money actually happened. And they did pretty much everything they could to test the system to try to break the rules. And so the rules that they tested were directional restrictions. We don't want to increase pumping in the salt intrusion areas or the pumping trough area. The allocation limits, we don't want somebody to trade all their water, so they're into surcharge rates. And then the user ID protections, they can only trade their water. They can't hack into somebody else's system. On the back end of the test, we're making sure the interface works, that the right information was being communicated, that the invoicing and electronic transfer of funds was working appropriately, and that the right information was given back to the GMA so we could adjust the allocations, and that the participants knew that what trades happened, what their new allocation is, or if the trade didn't happen. So that was all done by, again, Nature Conservancy and CLU. On the right-hand side, you see the trading platform where a grower would put in their information. But before they do that, they need to check their own information to know they have the water to trade. So I want to point out the ranch system data portal. And if I zoom in, it actually gives each grower what their market allocation is, what their total pumping year to date is, and then the water available to transfer if they choose to trade, or if they see they need to buy on the water market. So before your board today is to extend this water market phase 2 one more time. Nothing changes but the dates. But what is different is this is the earliest we've been able to start the water market in the reporting year. We have more AMI installed out in the field than ever, and we have the allocations already calculated and already communicated to the majority of the market participants. And there is discussion of a new allocation system replacing emergency ordinance E. If that happens, the allocation under the water market will retain its primacy. It would be the allocation to the growers in the water market, just as it is now over emergency ordinance E. So that's the action before you today. Before I get to the recommendations, I do want to touch on our NRCS conservation grant. Nature Conservancy is the primary awardee. We have a sub-award. It funded they provided $800,000 worth of funding for the AMI installation. We committed a little over $500,000 in cash contribution and some in-kind funds. Through this grant, it was hugely supportive of the water market and getting AMI installed. We did the selection of ranch systems through a selection committee who unanimously recommended ranch systems, and then contracted with ranch systems to get the AMI installed. But we did not spend all the money. There's quite a bit left, and though the sub-award expired at the end of June, the Nature Conservancy supports a one-year extension to help us find ways to spend this money, essentially. NRCS's goal, my understanding, is to return these funds to the growers. So we have ideas to either improve the AMI, make it more useful for the operators. Some of the money could be put into supporting the water market, paying the participation fees for the growers, and opening up the water market to third-party AMI. So we don't want to limit it to just ranch systems and those who applied through the grant. It needs to be open to everybody. So before I get to the recommendations on this board item, I do want to bring up the Water Market Ad Hoc Committee has been guiding a lot of the decisions on the water market. A lot of the AMI decisions have been coming from the Operations Committee. To continue the water market as an ad hoc committee we're stretching it as an ad hoc committee. It either needs to be formalized as a committee, or we can continue all this discussion and recommendations through the Operations Committee. So that is one piece of feedback I'd like to receive today. If we can just move this to the Operations Committee and essentially dissolve the Water Market Ad Hoc Committee. And with that, other than that guidance I would like on the Operations Committee, the recommended actions are up there.
Thank you, Arnie. With respect to committee assignment change, I am more than happy to recommend that the ad hoc committee basically terminate its operations, and all of the activities with respect to AMI and the water market go to the Operations Committee. The Operations Committee is Director Aranio, Director Bennett. Director Bennett was on the ad hoc with me. I'm happy not to attend one meeting. And so unless there's some objection from the board, from any member of the board, I know I've spoken to the members of the Operations Committee, and they are happy to take on the assignment unless anybody objects. And
Does that have to come back to us as a subsequent action?
it doesn't require the action of the board. It's really just quitting, ending the ad hoc is simple enough. So, but with that, let me start by asking the clerk to read the ordinance in title only and waive further reading. I guess we need a motion for that. Let's do this first. Any questions from the board
I have one.
Go ahead.
Can you back up one slide, please? You mentioned there in your top bullet that you still have approximately $575,000 between the two of grant funds and in-kind that is still yet to be spent, yet you're also claiming that you have about 98% participation in AMI, so there's not a whole lot of meters left to be received or to change out. One idea, you got a whole basin there that wasn't allowed to participate in any of this. What about opening the Las Posas Valley? You know, we've been sitting there kind of like the redheaded stepchild and not being able to participate in this. And you still got some AMI out there that needs to go in. What about opening up to that valley and let us also join into this water market and expand it that way? Oxnard had their chance. Give me some money.
Noted.
You know, as an idea there. As far as dissolving the ad hoc committee and going on to operations, sure, bring it. Let's do it. And that answers my questions, or my points.
Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the public, comments with respect to this item?
You know I have to have some. So Arnie, I'm sorry, Jeanette Lombardo, California Food and Agribusiness Advocates. My question, Arnie, is besides the trades that were instigated by, to test the system by Cal Lutheran and the Nature Conservancy, were there any other trades conducted? So no trades. So my question is, eventually one of these days we're going to be done with the pilot and we're going to be done with the phases and we're going to be putting out for bid the exchange administrator. And I just want to make sure everything that's being built by Cal Lutheran would be able to be transferred to another organization to do that function. Just want to make sure that nothing is proprietary or owned by the university. So that's one thing I just needed to make clear. Is that your understanding?
That's a good question. I mean, that's at least on the administrative side. Arnie, how does that work? Is there any proprietary software that they're using, a proprietary system to process these?
My understanding is there's not on the administrative exchange side, but the data portal that we have through Ranch, that one is.
That's understood.
Thank you.
Although, also my understanding is that was built fairly quickly, and we could probably rebuild that.
Any other questions or comments? All right.
Is there any, I've got one. Is there any anticipation for what the timeline might be that M&I will be able to participate in the water market?
Under the grant that we have, 3 phases, as soon as we're done with phase 2, which this would be an extension of phase 2. Phase 3 is a broader, more open water market.
We'll refer that question to the Operations Committee. All right. Is there a motion to read the ordinance in title only, waive further reading, find the ordinance exempt from Water Code 10728.6 and SEQA?
So moved.
Second.
We need a roll call, please.
Chair West,
Yes.
Director Arania,
Yes.
Director Craven,
Yes.
Director Borchard,
Yes.
With that, we ask the clerk to read the ordinance in title only.
an ordinance to amend the ordinance extending the Phase 2 Water Market Pilot Program.
And is there a motion to adopt the ordinance?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Chair West,
Yes.
Director Arania,
Aye.
Director Craven,
Yes.
Director Borchard.
Yes.
I just have one comment.
Yes.
I'm really happy to see that we're starting it earlier. My comment the past 2 times this has come to us is that we were so late in the year, especially the year that it was just a few months, that I didn't think anything was going to get done. So I'm happy to see this is earlier.
Along those lines, we'll move on to item number 7.
Chair West, Board, Arnie Anselm, staff to the GMA. Item number 7 is an extension to the Exchange Administrator MOU for the water market. It continues the requirements of the last agreement with Cal Lutheran. It very simply extends it. The only change is the date that it expires. And I want to point out an error I made when I first wrote this up is that one of the requirements of Cal Lutheran is that they need to submit a report 90 days after the close of the water market. And I have this matching the end of the water market. So we need to, I would request that we change that language to say October 31st, 2020. So the recommended actions are to approve this with that one change.
Questions or comments from the board? Or from the public?
So move.
And is there a second?
Second.
Please roll call.
Chair West?
Yes.
Director Arania?
Yes.
Director Craven?
Yes.
Director Borchard?
Yes.
Thank you. We're going to recess the general session right now to move into closed session, returning hopefully soon. Thank you. Charlotte, where are you, Charlotte? All right, it is 3:36. We have returned from closed session back into general session to report that no action was taken in closed session to be reported. With that, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the executive officer's report or to receive and file the executive officer's report.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.